Alright, Unit 5, Lesson 4. Let's rock and roll. Alright, so now we're on to multiplying. And we can use, basically it's called an each with each method. Or we're going to probably call it another thing. Or you can do the first, outer, inner, last process, also known as FOIL. But of course, what we've been doing now for the last few years is we've been basically doing, I would say, let's write this in another one. Most of you guys double distribute. Or, of course, our favorite word, tabular, the box method. Okay? So either way. Bottom line is, they say right here, remember, replace I squared with a -1. And keep always the answer when you're doing this should be an A plus BI form. So, let's do a couple of these. Let's take this first one here. Let's do the double distributor. What's 2 times 3? Well, that's 6. What's 2 times 4i? That's 8i. Nothing hard with this. -3i times 3 is a -9i. And finally, a -3 times a 4i, or -3i times a -4i. Now be careful there. That's going to be a -12, but I times I is an I squared. So we got to clean this up a little bit. We definitely have a 6 out in front. What is 8i minus 9i? Like terms here. Well, that's -1i. And then, keep in mind, isn't the I squared right here? We said, up above there, it's equal to -1. So what's -12 times -1? +12. So last thing, I got some more like terms here. Combine them. What's 6 plus 12? Well, it's 18. So the answer to that one comes out to be 18 minus I. Okay. Now you're also welcome to use tabular, like I said, or FOIL, or whatever method you want. Keep in mind this one here. Doesn't that really mean I've got a 2 minus 5i when I'm squaring it times a second 2 minus 5i? That's up to you what method. If you're going to do the tabular, 2 minus 5i, 2 minus 5i, you're going to get the same process. This box right here is 2 times 2, which is 4. When I multiply this box in the upper right-hand corner, 2 times a -5i is a -10i. The lower left is going to be 2 times -5, so that's another -10i. And finally, -5i times -5i is going to be -5 times -5 is 25i squared, right? So what comes out? A 4. This diagonal, remember, it's a -10i and -10i, so that's a -20i. And a 25i squared, remember, I squared is -1, so what comes out of that? A -25, doesn't it? So, the 4 and the -25 can be combined to be a -21. And then I've got the -20i there. And you've got your answer. All right? Number 3, same thing. FOIL, those that have never learned it, same thing as double distributed. What's the square root of 2 times the square root of 2? Oh, a pair of buddies, that's a 2. Comes out. What's the square root of 2 times I? Well, that's an I square root of 2. Then I get a minus I times square root of 2. So that's a minus I square root of 2. You should already have recognized this one, but if you didn't, we're doing it the long way. And then finally, a minus I times an I is a minus I squared. Well, I get the 2 out in front. What happens to these two? You're right, cancels. And then I get a minus I squared. Well, isn't that a minus times a -1? So that's really +1, isn't it? So your final answer comes out a whole number 3. And that's always a possibility. Okay, moving on. Now, I hope you would have caught the shortcut on the last one. Don't we have the same darn things except one's plus and one's minus? So DOP should be thrown out in your head there. So really, we know the outside, inside, the middle ones are going to cancel. So what's the square root of 5 times the square root of 5? It's going to be 5. And what's a minus 4i times a 4i? Well, that's a minus 16i squared. Once again, I squared is negative 1. So times that times a 16, and you will get positive 16. So my answer is 21. And you're welcome to do it quicker that way. You may go longer, but it's basically 21. Next one, not the same process, okay? Same thing. If you want to go tabular once again, I'll do a big tabular on this one. Make it a little bigger boxes here. I got a 3 minus square root of negative 16 and a 2 plus that. Actually, I'm going to go back here and we're going to erase this here for a sec. Let's talk about that first. We might as well make a little bit of cleanup here. Isn't minus square root of 16 going to be a minus, and then it's going to turn out to be 4i? Square root of 16 is 4, and negative sign comes out as an I. And the same thing down here. Square root of negative 25 is 5i, isn't it? So it's really 2 plus 5i. Makes it a little easier when we go to do tabular here. So what's 3 times 2? 6 for that box. This one is minus 8i when you do 2 times negative 4. 5 times 3, 5i times 3 is 15i. And then finally, a minus 4 times 5 is a negative 20, and then I times I is going to be I squared. So it's a negative 20i squared. So what comes out? 6. You do the diagonal once again, so 15 minus 8 is 7i. Minus 20i squared comes out as a minus 20 times a negative 1, so you basically get positive 20, don't you? Clean the 2 up. This one goes with this one. 20 plus 6 is 26, and a plus 7i. And we've got our answer. All right. Last little part I'm going to start introducing is basically the conjugate of a complex number. When I talk about the conjugate, yes, it's going to come into play again, just like we had a conjugate with square roots in the bottom. You cannot have an answer with an imaginary number in the denominator, so we're going to come into that play coming up. And so, for example, this is just leading you to the next lesson. What's the conjugate of 4 plus 2i? Well, when it was 4 plus radical 2 or something like that, you knew the conjugate was 4 minus the radical 2. Well, it's the same thing. It's going to be 4 minus 2i. And the reason we did that is take a look from up above. It's exactly why we did this type right here. The outside and the inside cancel. You get an I squared, which of course comes out as a negative 1, and you get rid of all the imaginary numbers. So we're going to need to know the conjugate. So the complex number and its conjugate is what will always turn out to be a positive number. So I'm going to leave you with that as a teaser for our next lesson. So we'll see you in class tomorrow. Have a good evening.